Hello, my name is David Primack. I teach a class in Yiddish and occasionally sing on my wife's YouTube channel. And I'll put the link in here if it's possible to do. But right now I'm having a frank talk outside of her channel about race relations. It's been in the news quite a lot and has been in the news very often over the past few decades, in fact, since before I was born. I was born in 1960, and I saw the civil rights movement come to statutory fruition in Congress, although I was a bit too young to understand it. My father was active in the peace movement in Chicago, and in the course of his pursuit of that movement, he met Dr. Martin Luther King at least once, probably more often. And also, growing up, for a time, we lived on the south side of Chicago, and I got beat up quite often going to school on the south side of Chicago because of whatever pent-up resentment at white people. But I owe my life and the life of my family to a notorious gang on the south side called the Blackstone Rangers, because in 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, they kept the south side quiet because they didn't want any rioting or looting in their turf. Since, to a great extent, they were the government in that area, they fulfilled their portion of the social contract. My knees are getting cramped here. Okay, that's better. So, race relations and I go back quite some time. Most recently, Roseanne Barr had her sitcom revival canceled by Disney because she tweeted what was interpreted as a disparaging racial remark on Twitter. Now, she swears up and down that at the time that she made the remark, she was unaware that Valerie Jarrett was black at all. I must confess I was also ignorant. Not only that, but when Halle Berry first made her thank you speech and announced that she was the first African American to ever receive an Oscar, that was the first I knew that she was African American either. I thought she was a very beautiful woman, but didn't know she was black. I'm in the spirit. I've begun to wonder about Judge Jeanine Pirro, formerly a judge, now a conservative talk show host on the Fox News channel, because she also has a very deep tan. Does she just have a deep tan? Is that a Mediterranean olive skin, as the name Jeanine Pirro would imply? Or is she black? I also learned, to my surprise, that J. Edgar Hoover was really a very light-skinned black man who passed for white and attempted to cover his whiteness by being very down on the civil rights movement. I also hear that he was homosexual, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about race relations here. Okay, so Anyway, the problem with the term racist is that it's imprecise. And W.H. Auden, the famous poet of the 1930s and 40s, said that imprecise language leads to insincerity. That was what, in large part, Orwell's dark futuristic novel 1984 was based on. The blurring of language to make it as imprecise as possible so that people can say anything and have it mean nothing, and thereby be able to manipulate people better. I also read, if you've never read it, I highly recommend it. Rafael Patai, the Israeli anthropologist's seminal work, The Arab Mind, which speaks about how the idiosyncrasies of the Arabic language, such as an unclear sense of time, leads to the susceptibility among Arabs of being manipulated by inflammatory rhetoric. Now, if I were posting this on YouTube, that might be construed as hate speech, but I do not hate Arabs, although I live in Israel, and there are daily news stories about violent acts committed by Arabs. I happen to know a few Arabs who are quite okay fellas that I have no problem with at all. I just have problems with anyone, regardless of race, religion, or skin color, who has a problem with me. So, that being clarified, I've said that language is imprecise with regard to race relations, and this is the root of all of our problems. There are two kinds of bigots, really, or racists. One is the sort who doesn't care to associate with people that he considers either inferior to him or just too different from him for him to understand or her to understand. And I will not go through the multiple gender stuff. That just is not me. So him or her, let's leave it at that. But there's something else entirely. For example, there are anti-Semites who don't want Jews in their country club, or don't like to sit next to them in the subway, or don't like to frequent Jewish stores. And then there are Jew haters, Nazis, people who want to annihilate Jews. But with regard to race, black versus white, there is no such term. There has to be some distinction, though, between somebody who simply tells an off-color joke or makes a off-color remark about blacks, and a sheet-wearing Ku Klux Klaner who just hung somebody because they were black. But there's no such distinction in English. And this is why, in the United States, you have such anomalies and such aberrations in American history as the Antifa movement, that dress like Ku Klanners and attack anyone who disagrees with them like fascists and claim that they are anti-fascists. They are confused to the point where they hate anyone who disagrees with them, and they have become exactly that which they purport to hate and despise. Hate is a pretty bad emotion. It leads to unspeakable acts, and even barring that, unspeakable rudeness, chasing people out of restaurants, absurdities like calling a newly conservative black woman a white supremacist, excuse me, and hounding her out of a restaurant, throwing water on her. To her credit, she did not retaliate in kind or press charges against them. But this is not what opposing racism and bigotry is supposed to be. So let me, right now, totally ad-libbing. I have no script. In fact, I wasn't sure what I was going to say. But let me propose a transplant from modern Hebrew into modern English. A mere bigot we can call, let's say, not a racist exactly. Let's call him shoot, I'm having trouble here. A gazanit. In Hebrew, that means a serious racist, somebody who really hates people of different races. But in English, we can fudge it and use the term racist and Nazi for the really hardcore haters, which I think is the only proper target. Somebody who's merely making a nasty joke about black people, such as Eddie Murphy at one point, I think, was tricked into doing on Saturday Night Live, back when he was new to the show, before he became the only talented player on that show, except for maybe Joe Piscopo. That we can just call baseline gazanut. You know, bigotry, racial nastiness. And we can save racism for the real hardcore racists, the Ku Klanners, the people who'll drag a black man to death behind their pickup truck, as once happened, I remember, back in I think it was the early 90s. And other such ugliness. Now, let's talk for a moment about Roseanne Barr. Like I say, I could either take her word for it that she didn't know that Valerie Jarrett was black or not. That really is weighing on the scales of justice. As for her citing the fact that she has black grandchildren, that's really hardly proof of racism. Your daughter or son did all the begetting without so much as a buyer leave from you, and you somehow become you somehow get the credit, and this is proof that you're not a racist. For that matter, I have some black grandchildren. 2, I think, although 1 I think is too light to be considered black, unless she wins an Academy Award or gets somebody to make a nasty tweet about her or something. But that doesn't prove I'm not a racist either. In fact, it's extremely hard to prove that you're not something. It's a logical impossibility. As anybody who has studied logic, rhetoric, and philosophy can tell you, you cannot prove a negative. I think law also, which is applied logic, will attest to the same. That's why people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. So, let us then refer to the New Testament, incredibly, although I am not Christian myself. I have heard second and third hand a few words from the New Testament, which, though I don't believe in the divinity of Jesus or anything like that, which I hope you don't hold against me, I cannot help but remark on the wisdom of these words. Says something in the New Testament to the effect that How do you know a good man from a bad man? By their fruits shall ye know them, it says. I don't know how that translates into the Greek or the original Aramaic, which is not extant but can be extrapolated from the Greek, I hear. But that is very wise. And as for Roseanne Barr, in her defense, I can say that I am a great fan of her show. And she very early began introducing black characters onto the early episodes of the show. And she did not have them talk in rhyme or any of that stereotypical stuff that they used to put into sitcoms in the 70s or 80s. She had them act naturally, speak naturally, and usually showed them as positive people. In one episode, I recall, her son DJ did not want to kiss a girl in the school play because she was black, and he was a little put off by that. And at the restaurant which Roseanne and her sister had started, a black man with an angry look came in towards closing time. And because he had an angry look, they closed the door on him. And they wouldn't let him in and threatened to call the police until he explained that he is the father of the little girl that DJ refused to kiss. And so they let her in, and he was very put off by them and says, I can see where DJ gets it to them. And her sister Jackie blamed the man, saying that he had come in the door in a very alarming way. And Roseanne was more introspective about it and wondered if she really did have some unconscious bigotry in her. People who express that sort of introspection, I don't think are racist. Racists are really looking for an excuse to feel better than somebody else without putting in any effort. They'll say, I'm white and they are not white. Or I am black and they are white. I'm not going to say a pejorative word about blacks or a pejorative word popular among blacks about whites, but those are well-known words, so it's quite unnecessary. Anyway, so it is my thought that Roseanne Barr is not a racist person. She ran for president on the Green Party ticket as part of the Green Party's Black Caucus. She has not exhibited racism on her television show, and she has not we know of no stories of her behaving in a bigoted manner towards crew and cast members on her sitcoms. And she herself says that she wasn't aware that Valerie Jarrett is white. I would presume she's innocent until somebody can prove that she is overtly racist. And if she is, she ought to be taught a good lesson, which was a good lesson to the tune of millions of dollars to her. But that shouldn't make her a pariah forever. A Nazi such as David Duke, or a Klan member such as Robert Byrd, are beyond the pale, and that is unforgivable because they are haters. But at worst, Roseanne Barr was a Gazanit, She exhibited some gazanut, and I don't think she even did that. So, I wish that Disney would reinstate her contract, and she had actually some rights to sue under that, which she did not exercise, and she felt terrible about being even construed as racist and apologized for it. But I think she was punished for apology, and that is just simply not fair. Okay, and this is what I have to say. I hope it's been illustrated, and I hope nobody construes me as making hate speech here, because that was not my intent. Thank you, and good night.